Mirrorless fanboys and fangirls need to shut the fuck up and not write clickbait articles because DSLR users will find that this is actually a pretty capable mirrorless camera. What's up guys, Bloodmoon Bobby here. So now, after Nikon has announced their new full-frame mirrorless camera system, Canon has come out with their own. Kind of like Nikon, Canon used to have their own mirrorless camera system. I still think they have it. It's the EOS M system, which I'll give them credit that they had APS-C cameras instead of having 1-inch sensors like on the Nikon, but they were just very bare bones, very run-of-the-mill cameras. I remember especially when the original EOS M came out, it had some really bad autofocus. You could watch it in digital revs video on the EOS M, but it was just a very lackluster camera. It got the job done. I wouldn't say they look like terrible cameras, but they weren't exactly the super creative cameras like the Olympus Pen series or the video-friendly kind of cameras that we see from companies like Panasonic and Olympus. But now, I guess you could say that Canon, like Nikon, had a rebirth of their mirrorless camera system. Insert your Bible jokes here, and they have announced the EOS R, which is their new mirrorless camera. And like in the Nikon Z video, I want to get into the lenses first before anything. So the lens mount of the EOS R system is called the RF mount. Interestingly, Canon decided to go down a more, I guess you could say, conservative route with the RF lenses, because the RF lens mount is actually the exact same size as Canon's EF lens mount. You know, whereas on the Nikon Z, where the Z lens mount is slightly bigger than the current Nikon F lens mount, Canon's is pretty much the same size. Now that doesn't mean that this lens mount is going to take some really bad lenses. Canon announced 4 lenses to go along with their EOS R camera, including the 35mm 1.8 macro, there's a 50mm 1.2 lens, a 28-70 f2, and a 24-105 f4. So you got a pretty decent amount of lenses. I mean, of course it was going to be much better than when the EOS M came out. I think when the EOS M came out, they came out with an 18-55 lens and a 50mm lens, and that was it for a really long time. The lens, I mean, yes, more lenses came out, but these 4 lenses, the first 4 that Canon's coming out with this year, is a pretty good lineup. So the camera has a 30.4 megapixel full frame sensor, which is similar to the Canon 5D Mark IV. CNET said that there is an optical low pass filter, which is to the chagrin of some people, which an advantage to others, and I'll get into that in a second. It's got a really amazing 5,655 AF phase detection points, which is pretty crazy because we just got used to the idea of having over 100 on Nikon's DSLR, so it's really crazy that we're even now getting into the thousands of AF points. And the sensor has an ISO capability going from 100 to 40,000, but it is expandable to 50 to 102,400. It's got dual pixel RAW, which I'll talk about in a second. Now, Canon touts that the EOS R can shoot at 8 frames per second, but it's actually 8 frames per second if you want to shoot with autofocus, which is kind of okay to me. And the camera has a 100% coverage, 3.69 million dot OLED electronic viewfinder, a Digic 8 image processor, a 3.15-inch 2100K dot rotating LCD, which is really nice if you like to do a lot of vlogging where you're pointing the camera at yourself. It has a dust and weather resistant body, no optical stabilization, which is kind of and USB charging, which is, in my opinion, a plus. I mean, USB charging may not be as fast as just putting your battery into a camera charger, but it comes as a real convenience, I think. Especially in this day and age when we're charging our smartphones and tablets over USB, I think it's actually a real advantage. And as for video, the EOS R is no slouch either. In terms of video, the camera can shoot 4K at 30 frames per second, which I didn't see anything about 24p. I'm sure it does. I didn't see it anywhere, but please let me know in the comments if it does. And it will actually output 10-bit 422 video externally, so if you're using something like an Atmos Ninja recorder. You have that ability to output really high-res video. It shoots in the All-I codec, a very high-resolution format, and it can also shoot 1080p at 60 frames per second. Unfortunately, not at 120 frames like you can on Sony or Nikon's offerings. And like the Nikon, Canon uses their own log profile, which supports 12 stops of dynamic range, which comes in real handy if you want to do some hardcore color grading in post. And the camera has a 3.5mm headphone and microphone jack, like any really good video camera. In terms of pricing, the camera will cost $2,300 for the body only, or you can get it for $2,400 for a kit with the 24 to 105 lens, and it'll be coming out in October of 2018. And now the lenses, they've also announced pricing and availability for lenses, but I will include that in the video here just so you don't have to hear me drowning that all along. So this is the Canon EOS R, and basically on the surface, it's definitely a very interesting competitor. It's definitely a compelling competitor that Canon has put out. It's essentially a 5D Mark IV, but in a mirrorless body. And it's got a really good sensor and some really cool video features. Couple things kind of bum me out. First of all, the frame rate, where it can shoot at 5 frames per second with autofocus, which is kind of a bummer to me, especially since Nikon came out with cameras like the Z6 and the Z7, which can shoot at 12 frames per second and 9 frames per second continuously. 5 frames per second is definitely usable even in sports. I don't know about like any hardcore photojournalism, but especially if you're just starting out, it's decent. Like, I remember when I first started shooting sports photography, my camera had 4 frames per second, but it's just not as fast as Canon could have made it. As for the inclusion of the optical low pass filter, it's to the chagrin of some, an advantage to others, especially because if you do fashion photography, having an optical low pass filter is a plus because you won't get those Aurea patterns, which are those weird looking lines you see in some photos, and they especially pick up in things like fashion photography with things like the threading, and that creates these weird wavy lines. But not having an optical low pass filter is preferred by especially like landscape photographers, because then it's able to add a tiny bit more resolution to your photos. You know, when your camera doesn't have that filter in the way, you can get sharper photos. So it's kind of debatable to me whether it's a flaw or not. Some people need that higher resolution. Some people don't like having moire patterns when they edit photos. I will say, interestingly enough, the D7000 that I'm shooting on has an optical low pass filter, and I see moire patterns anyway. So maybe my camera just has a crappy optical low pass filter, but this inclusion of the OLPF, I think, is kind of debatable. And I also talked about how the camera has the dual pixel RAW that we saw on the Canon EOS 5D Mark IV. And dual pixel RAW basically means that you can take those photos in post and you can adjust things like ghosting, sharpness, and even bokeh after the fact using Canon software. So not sure if too many people are going to use this feature, especially since, like, I know a lot of people that shoot Canon and they prefer using things like Adobe Lightroom and Photoshop. So not sure if too many people are going to use this feature, but it's definitely a big plus if you prefer to use Canon software. So yeah, the Canon EOS R, while I wouldn't call it like the best mirrorless full frame option out there, if you're a Canon user, or even if you just want to get into mirrorless full frame photography, I would say it's a pretty decent option. What's not decent, and I want to address this in my video because I kind of went on a tirade on Twitter and now my heart's starting to pump up, is what the fuck is with the mirrorless full frame fanboys out there, like, or even just mirrorless fanboys, fangirls, whatever, fanatics, whatever word you want to use. It's just like, what is up these like people's asses where they're cut, where like Petapixel and The Verge are coming out with these articles with saying things like mirrorless is the future. Just like, we're not fucking there yet. Like, will mirrorless cameras replace DSLRs? Maybe, but why are you treating it like I don't know if this is the vibe you're going for, but the vibe I'm getting from these articles, especially with those really clickbaity titles, is you're basically making it sound like, oh, mirrorless is the new cool type. DSLRs are just, that's what the old people use. Like, fuck you. Like, photography. One of the things I really like about photography is whether you're a pro shooter or casual shooter, like, everybody uses different kinds of cameras to shoot, whether it's a DSLR, like what I'm using to film this video, or a mirrorless camera, or even a Leica rangefinder. Like, what are you going to do when you see, like, somebody using a Leica rangefinder? Are you going to say, oh, ha, 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 you're using an old Leica? Or are you going to stare at them in glory? And look, I'm not saying, you know, rangefinder it's the best. It's your personal choice if you prefer using a rangefinder or a DSLR, but it's just, I don't understand what is up with these people's asses to, you know, have, or even like have these arguments that, yep, mirrorless is taken over. And the reason I say that is we haven't gotten to the point where DSLRs are on death's door. You know, it's not like when Olympus came out with their E5 DSLR and it was very underwhelming, like it was not very well spec'd for DSLR. So it made sense in the case of Olympus because they're, you know, the last DSLR they put out was underwhelming, so it made sense that they focused on their mirrorless cameras. But since many of Canon and Nikon's DSLRs are still well used in the industry, although I can tell you there's definitely some really ignorant people out there that think, oh, the only way to shoot a video is with a DSLR. Like, I don't support those kind of people either. I just don't support when people say, oh, one kind of camera is the only way to go. You know, like, whatever happened to the Chase Jarvis saying of the best camera is the one that's with you? And since DSLRs are still capable of being able to still have continuous, like high continuous frame rates, maybe not as much as mirrorless, but still plenty capable. And the fact that many still prefer having an optical viewfinder where they can see exactly what the lens is seeing. And I know some people are going to say, well, mirrorless cameras can shoot 4K video in log. Have you looked at Canon's 5D Mark IV? You can get the 5D Mark IV with the ability to shoot in log. So isn't it reasonable that maybe one of these days Nikon's going to update their D5 or D850 with the ability to shoot in log? Just, we're not there yet. Will there be a day where mirrorless cameras totally replace DSLRs? Maybe, but we haven't gotten to the point. When we get to the point where mirrorless cameras can shoot at such high frame rates or have such advanced video features where DSLRs can catch up in absolutely no way, then yes, you could say that. But today, no, we cannot just yet. So please take the redwood out of your asses. I'm just talking to the people who are saying shit about how, like, oh, mirrorless, this is the way of the future. It's just like, whether you're saying that because you're trying to piss off DSLR users or because you're a news organization desperate to come up with a clickbaity title, just live in the fucking now and stop saying shit like that, okay? God, and things like that almost made me not get excited for the Canon EOS R. You don't want to hear, like, you know, biased people say things like, oh, I'm not going to get excited for the Canon EOS R because there are some idiots that made articles saying mirrorless is the way of the future. It's just like, you're like, those people that are saying things like mirrorless is the way of the future, you're making it hard for people to enjoy the fact that, or it's still an opinion, but the possibility that, hey, the EOS R, Canon's first mirrorless full-frame camera, it has a lot of potential. Like, don't you want people to say that? You don't need to put out articles saying mirrorless is the way of the future just to get people to say, oh yeah, I'll buy the Canon EOS R or the Sony A7 III or the Nikon Z. You don't need to say that, okay? But anyway, ending off the video with this before I really explode, I really wanted to say some really nasty things in this video, but I want to maintain some kind of credibility, and I do have good expectations for this Canon EOS R camera. Is it like the best option, especially if you're like a Canon shooter that likes to shoot sports? Probably not, since it only shoots at 5 frames per second for autofocus. But if you're the kind of photographer that likes to shoot portraiture, landscapes, and maybe every now and then a sports game, then I could highly recommend this Canon EOS R. And also, if you like to shoot video, and hopefully it does have 24p, then it's a really good option too. I will say that mirrorless cameras are definitely a good option in terms of frame rate and in terms of video. Like, I know there's some really good video cameras that are mirrorless cameras out there, like the Panasonic GH5, for example, and many others that I could name. And also, you know, the Nikon Z cameras have the ability to shoot 4K and log. Like, I will say that there is some good technology in mirrorless cameras, but don't go around saying that DSLRs are obsolete just yet, okay? So this has been Blood Moon Bobby, and you know, do you know what I want to say?
You need to shut the fuck up!
Actually, Pen, I think I'll just pull an angry video game nerd and hurl. Don't worry, guys, that was actually a Pepsi that I just quote-unquote puked. But seriously, I am so tired of this whole mirrorless fanboy clickbait war thing that's going on. Whether you shoot with a DSLR, mirrorless camera, just whatever camera you want to use, a film camera, just take good photos, okay? Don't start stirring up controversy on the internet. There's already plenty of that. Hey guys, be sure to like this Blood Moon Bobby video if you enjoyed it. Please share this video, subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment. Be sure to ring the notification bell to be notified about my latest upload. Follow me on my social media pages at Blood Moon Bobby to find out about what I'll be covering next and for more of my opinions. Thanks for watching.